this item I think is really, really important for a number of reasons. Even if you don't have an anxiety disorder, this is something that all of us are prone to in some way. And and that is learning how to not respond to what's going on inside of you that you experience as anxiety. Now, what does that mean? Well, anxiety is a heightened state. Okay. So your adrenal system, your limbic system, everything, if you've got stuff you're carrying around inside from trauma and all of that, your system can kind of stay activated all the time. You can be wired in a way that produces all this internal activation. Well, what that is your body is getting activated. Now, here's what's interesting about anxiety disorders, specifically sometimes panic disorder, is that your system gets activated. But if you were a computer, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference almost in that state and an Olympic swimmer that's getting activated to dive into the water to break a world's record. Now, they're not scared of drowning. Okay. They're activated to be able to go do something and perform at higher levels. The activation that's going on in your body is pretty similar. Now, here's what happens in an anxiety disorder. What people do is the body experiences this activation and then you feel it. And then your brain's got to interpret, well, why am I feeling that way? Oh, it must dot, dot, dot. It must be because I'm getting on a plane and the plane could crash, or I'm driving over a bridge and something could go wrong, or my loved one is out driving a car. They could have an accident, or if I get too far away from home, or. And what's happening is, your brain is trying to kind of match up with what you feel inside. Now, here's the problem with that. When your brain tells you that thing is the cause of your anxiety, then what do? You avoid that thing. All right. So if I'm afraid of planes, sometimes I wish I were could travel less. But if I'm afraid of planes, then I feel that. Okay, so what happens? Well, uh, I don't think I'll get on that flight. I'm not going to take that trip. But what happens then is you calm down. Now you've just taught your brain that the cause of the anxiety is the airplane. All right. Could be something that interferes even more with a lot of our lives. What about just social anxiety? Or what about anxiety over maybe intimacy or having a difficult conversation or going in for a job interview? Anytime that we feel afraid of dot, 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 something, here's what happens. You feel the activation and you have a response to the activation. Now, here is the key to a lot of problems. Many times, what we develop is the response to the activated state is to avoid the interview, the bringing up that topic, the getting on the plane, the calling the difficult person. And if we avoid the again, we've trained our brain that the is the cause of the anxiety because we calm down, it gets reinforced. It's like, giving a cookie to a kid for doing their chores. It's going to do it again. Well, the key to this, now again, this is one part of dealing with anxiety, but long term, what's very important is that we have to develop something called response inhibition. Now, this has been around for a long time. And what you're doing is you're going to start to train your brain to feel the anxiety without doing your normal response. Now, I'm going to say that again. You're going to feel the anxiety. You're going to actually, sometimes even in treatment, we expose people to the anxiety, getting closer to getting on an airplane. And what's that going to do? I mean, even making the reservation for some people or thinking about having that conflict and that difficult discussion. The thinking about it will just in itself, that exposes you to it. And you're going to feel that activation inside. So the scientific name for this is exposure, because you're going to get exposed to the thing, right, that triggers the anxiety, and response inhibition. exposure and response inhibition. So what that means is that when you feel anxious, you have a response to it, like you're starting to worry. Worry is a big, rumination, all of that are part of this. You start to worry or you avoid stuff or you go check the door multiple times to see if you locked it. There's some way in which you have a response, worry, avoidance, reactions, start thinking in certain ways. And that chain is what we are after breaking. So how do you break a chain? Well, you got to grab a hold to one piece of it and you got to undo the link to the rest of the chain. What we're trying to undo is the response, but we're not going to try to undo the activation. That's what I keep calling when your system amps up. Okay. Let me give you an example of this. What we're going to do is we're going to feel it. Okay. You're going to feel it and you're not going to do anything about it to avoid it. You're going to feel it and then you're just going to sit with it. Oh, there's that feeling. My body's getting activated. I'm getting amped up. My heart's beating faster. Okay. Now, normally you go do something about it. You start to worry. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to avoid the plane. We're not going to avoid the conversation. You're going to sit like the Olympic swimmer, ready to jump into the water and feeling amped. But this time, you're not going to try to do away with it. You're going to sit with it and just be with it. Okay. You're going to feel it. Just embrace it. Yeah, there's that feeling. There's that anxious feeling. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she had a really horrible thing happen on an airplane one time. She was about 5 or 6 years old, and the door got locked. She went to the bathroom, the door got locked. And while she was in there, the plane started going over turbulence, and she was locked in. And she developed, some anxiety around that, and then it started to kind of spread. As the technical term is, it started to generalize to other situations to where she would start to be afraid of sleepovers, and she, all this kind of stuff. And as her dad and a psychologist, because as a psychologist, I know you start to avoid things that you're afraid of, and your world will continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I made a commitment. I said, I am not going to allow this to happen. Now, with that commitment, meant I've got to keep her from avoiding things. And this can get pretty tough to do. And a little girl goes off to first of all, plans a sleepover, somebody's birthday. She's going to go. Then she's starting to get anxious, doesn't want to go. No, Lucy, you're going. Lucy, you're going to go, and not letting her avoid it. And then when you get the call at 9 o'clock, come get me, come get me. No, you're going to stay there. Good night, and hang up the phone. It's a hard thing to do, but by the way, she did awesome. She's 21 now. She performs. She's a singer-songwriter, performs on stage and has a big life, travels a lot. But in fact, I've interviewed her on this program before about it. And she'll tell you, the hardest thing was to learn to sit with the anxiety without doing the response. I remember I taught her a little formula. Feel it, accept it, act, or choose. In other words, okay, I'm going to feel the anxiety. I'm just going to accept it. It just as it is. Just learn to feel it, sit with it, just sit with it. And then act. I'm going to go to the party. And if it comes with me, it's coming with me. And I'm just going to, when I feel it, I'm going to interpret it as a bodily reaction, which is what it is, not go thinking crazy things about it, but just learn to embrace it. I actually had the experience one time, had a coworker who had a severe fear of flying. I mean, would not get on a plane without taking a bunch of tranquilizers. And if there was a bar near the gate, she was going to hit it hard before she went on. We used to all kind of laugh at how we kind of had to drag her through security. And I kept trying to, I said, let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. I can help you with this. No, 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 it's fine. And what you try to do is control it. The worst thing you do is try to control it, because you try to control it, then you can't control it, then it scares you that I can't control it, and it starts to spiral, right? So I said, just give me one crack. So we had about a 3-hour flight. I said, just give me one crack, just one time. She says, okay. So we get on the plane, sit next to her. I said, okay, when you start to feel it, I want you to tell me. She said, I'm feeling it. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. Just sit there and just try to get into the feeling. Tell me where you feel it. She says, I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my arms. Okay, feel it. Tell me what it feels like. Just gonna sit with it. It's not gonna kill you. Might be a little uncomfortable. Let's just sit with it. Let's just sit with it. And we went through this over and over and over. And then she'd start to, start to try to control her. She'd start to look at, no, don't look around. Everything's, don't look around. I just want you to feel it. Just accept it as it is. We're not going to do anything with it. Don't even think about it in terms of the plane. Are we okay? No, I'm not going to do that. I just want you to focus on your body. Just breathe and focus on your body, not trying to make it go away. I said, don't try to go away because the part of your brain that's in control is not the part where the anxiety is coming from. It's coming from the part you can't control. So we're just going to let it do its thing. We're just going to sit there and sit there, sit there. Now, I don't want to make any false expectations here. I have seen this happen. It does happen quickly sometimes. Usually it takes much more than that. By the time we finished that 3-hour flight, she was pretty much over her fear, and the next year we traveled a lot and just kind of wasn't much of an issue anymore. Now, what has happened in that? What's the technical kind of thing that's happening? Well, what's happened over time is your body's activated for whatever reason. It could be trauma from something. It could be thinking patterns like the cognitive people focus on. It could be a lot of different stuff. But when you avoid, see, we're talking about response inhibition. When you avoid the normal response, like not talking to the person or starting to worry about it, worry itself is a mechanism to try to calm yourself down, but it doesn't help. When you start to obsess about it, whatever, instead of just feeling it and letting it be. See, when we do the response, it trains it that that is really the problem. But this time, when I let her do the response, just going to feel the activation. So she felt the activation on and off for a few hours, but she didn't do anything about it. So what happens? Your brain starts to go, huh, I must have been wrong. Huh. When you have that feeling, it must not mean that something bad's going to happen. It must mean something else. And then over time, it's like, well, if there's nothing to be afraid of, then activation even starts to go. So obviously, there's other aspects in treating anxiety, but this response inhibition is a big one. So I want you to, whatever it is you're kind of anxious about, learn. This is what mindfulness does. Mindfulness just sits there with it and notices. Noticing is a big word in mindfulness. You sit there and you notice, oh, there's my body responding. There it is. I just played in a golf tournament. I hadn't played in a golf tournament forever because of my injuries. And I remember standing up um, on the first tee and all of a sudden feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm about to hit a shot that counts for the first time in forever. And I remember feeling that. And then I remember exactly what we're talking about. And I literally, I pictured the Olympic swimmer. Oh, I'm just getting ready to perform better. That's just my body, and just let it be there. Just and then I hit the shot. But if you start to think, "Oh my gosh, that means I don't wanna hit it in the bunker, I don't wanna hit it in the lake," then you start to take control, then it actually amps it up. So all of this is to say, you can't always talk yourself out of a bodily activation. What you can do is let it end with the bodily activation, and that's all that's gonna happen. Not gonna avoid the conflict. I'm not gonna try to hit the shot differently. I'm not gonna get off the plane. I'm not gonna avoid, going to the party, whatever it is. I'm just going to embrace this is the feeling. It's okay. There's my heart rate. There's that queasy feeling. And just learn to let it be. And when you let it be and let it be and let it be and let it be, then you kind of learn there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So there's just a little trick. Now, I'll give one little disclaimer on this. there are some times that, um, that going further into getting triggered can become too much for some people. That's why we do this, as I said, in incremental ways. Sometimes it's just thinking about it. Sometimes it's taking somebody's agoraphobic. They might go to the front porch, and asking them to go to the grocery store. You don't want to trigger, especially if people have PTSD and some very difficult things. This has to be monitored by somebody who knows what they're doing. And you don't want to overwhelm the system where it's too traumatizing. But by and large, if you look at all of the research and treatment and all of that, that it's very unusual. If people want to get over a fear in order to do something, it's very unusual to get over the fear so you can do something. It's usually the case that you got to do something with the fear and let the fear learn that the something is not causing the fear. And that means we learn to kind of just embrace it. That's how I feel. I'm anxious. It's okay. Not going to interpret it catastrophically. If you go more deeply into this, go to boundaries.me. And if you go to our workshops tab, you'll see Outsmart Your Anxiety and a whole I think a 2.5 hour-ish webinar on this. And the boundaries.me platform has a lot on it about dealing with anxiety. So look that up, www.boundaries.me.